learned to read from my mother and sister. My dad probably read to me too, but I don't really remember that. There are still tapes around of where my sister would record me reading to my dolls at around the age of 4. Of course, a lot of these were really just me remembering the story and what someone would say on each page as they would read to me, but I can remember reading to my dolls a lot. I can also very clearly remember sitting in my first grade classroom during circle time and my teacher saying she was bringing out a list of new words for us to try. I can remember thinking, wait, I know what these say. I can remember looking around at the other kids wondering if they knew what they said like I did. I can remember shouting them out as soon as she would point to a new word. I think about how I developed as a reader, I think about home first. I was raised in a household where reading was cool. My mom read, my dad read, my sister read. I can remember a time when we went to a store to buy a bookshelf and thinking, wow, no one could ever read that much. Then we put all of my sister's Babysitter's Club books on the shelf, and I realized that not only could you read that much, but that my sister already had. I can remember getting my own bookshelf and looking at all of my books on the shelf, and it felt good. I got new storybooks from the store when we would go, and I was a good girl. I had tons of the little golden books and a series of books called Sweet Pickles. I used to stay up late with my clip-on light turned on to read books. My mom and dad bought me a set of tapes and storybooks that were Disney-themed, and you could listen to the tape read the book to you. In school, I can remember having 2 books for reading class. One was a textbook and one was a workbook. I can remember reading about Jill and Bill and answering questions in a workbook. I can also remember having some really, really old textbooks in school. I can even remember my 2nd or 3rd grade textbook being called Helicopters and Gingerbread Men. I don't really think I enjoyed much of the reading I did in school, but I liked doing it because I was really good at it. I was surrounded by readers at home and enjoyed the ability to be really good at something, so I developed an overall positive attitude about reading throughout my early grade school experience. One of the best reading experiences I had at home was when my mom started reading books with me instead of just to me. We would pick a chapter book, usually one I had just received from a school book order, and then she would read a chapter to me, and then I would have to read the next chapter to her. We would do this at night before bed. She would sit beside me as I was laying down, and we would read our one chapter, sometimes 2 if I could con her into it, before I went to sleep. This stopped around my 2nd grade year due to my dad having a very bad accident where he broke his back. He was in constant pain and needed a lot of help for a while, and he would scream at night when he was trying to sleep. So reading then wasn't really something that my mom could do anymore with me. However, it did draw me into reading as somewhat of an escape, something that would help me. And still now, I find when I'm really, really stressed, scared, or anxious, I immediately look for something to read. During my 8th grade year, I can remember having a textbook and workbook again in reading class, and the workbook would have these tests we would have to tear out at the beginning of the year, and she would give them to us as we would complete a unit. I can remember getting 100 on the first one, 100 on the second one, 100 on the third one, and then by the time we got to the 4th, I had stressed myself out trying to keep up the record of having 100. I could remember how I was in the most advanced reading class, but still being bored with the reading, too. In college, I was forced to read all sorts of things from all over the world. I hated a lot of it. I hated being forced to read anything so quickly for daily quizzes. I had no time to read anything for fun. So, I became an only when required to type of reader. It wasn't until I was out of my undergrad and my first round of graduate school that I picked up books for fun again. And what brought me back to reading for fun? Well, Mr. Harry Potter, of course. I read the first one and was suddenly like, wow, remember this fun part of reading thing? You really need to get back to that. And I have ever since. Learning to write was not as pleasant of an experience as learning to read. I think I started out really hating learning to write from the beginning when I couldn't understand why my letters never looked perfect. We would get these letters to trace and then write on our own, and mine never looked pretty like the ones you could trace. I would often mix up my lowercase p's and q's and sometimes my b's and d's. I would quite frequently, through first grade, write my r's backward. It was hard for me to grasp, and much of what I had heard about my writing was negative. So, as I learned to write sentences and spelling words, I always hated the feeling of being not good at something, or maybe even never good enough. Spelling was always one of my worst subjects. I can remember in my honors 6th grade class, we were taken to the school library once a week and we were supposed to pick an article from one of the kid-friendly magazines and write a summary of the article. I learned somehow that she never really read these, so what did I do? I picked the easy magazines about animals, found the shortest article, and copied it word for word. I always got an A. I did well enough in my writing to stay in honors classes throughout high school. We never wrote much, just the occasional piece here and there. I can remember just copying and pasting things, citing them and turning them in, and again, I got A's. I took college writing classes while in high school so I could get dual credit for both college and high school. Even in the college writing class, the only thing we wrote was a brief essay on the human brain and one paper about a topic of our choice with a novel we had read. I wrote about symbolism and irony in the Scarlet Letter. I don't think I ever even got the paper back. However, I got an A in the class. In college, I was able to write successfully for the requirements given to me. The papers I wrote were never too challenging. The most difficult one was my senior thesis paper about the works of Bronte. That one got me a C, but I also wrote it without reading the majority of the books. I was okay with that. While a lot of my writing was not rewarding, I did find some gratitude in writing for the media. I wrote for our college newspaper and some for the college news station, and in my internship, I got to write PR type pieces. I enjoyed seeing what I wrote find a home or an audience in those mediums. I don't know if many people have such different experiences with reading and writing. I know all of my reading experiences were full of confidence, even if not something I always really enjoyed because of what I was forced to read. My writing, however, was never really a positive thing, and I just kind of found a way to make it work. I know with me personally, it seems somewhat overwhelming to me how much those positive experiences influenced me, and how much the influence at home really impacted my outlook on the subject of reading. I'm not certain if this experience was supposed to make me realize how significant each experience is, but it has opened my eyes on how I, as a teacher, need to consider my impact on my students.